This cheeky little upstart is the facelifted Hyundai i30N, and please don't make the same mistake that I did in thinking all Hyundai has done for this update is add an 8-speed automatic. There is so much new with this car that I was genuinely shocked. So in this video, we're going to talk about why the i30N is one of the biggest surprises of the year for me. We're going to look at the design. I love this dark chrome finish. Jump inside to see what has changed in the updated cabin. This bigger 10.25-inch central touchscreen. And then go for a drive before putting this car up against the stopwatch to see just how fast it is in the real world. This is definitely a 5.4-second car. If you're impatient, you can jump ahead because the time codes for those sections are below. And why not jump into the comments right now to tell me what you'd prefer between an i30N and a Volkswagen Golf GTI? Because I reckon after watching this video, you might just change your mind. Bold prediction from the outset. Is this the best looking hot hatch you can currently buy? I know that beauty is in the eye of the beholder, but to my eyes, it strikes the perfect balance between being aggressive and sporty without being too shouty. Now, since it first burst onto the scene a few years ago, the i30N has kind of made a name for itself as the hot hatch you buy if you find a Golf GTI a little bit too mature, a little bit too reserved. And for 2021, the update to this car is really hefty. There's new design, new technology inside, even tweaks to the suspension, the steering, and there's more power and torque as well. And this one is the all-new 8-speed dual-clutch automatic, which starts from $47,500. Let's start with what's changed visually at the front, because Hyundai has given it a totally redesigned front bumper. Remember the old car used to have the DRL down here? Well, now all of the light signature has moved into this main headlamp, and it has this really cool arrow-shaped DRL through there, which I think is a really nice little touch. The front grille has changed as well. It's now much wider, much larger, sort of cascades down. And there are these 3 cutout sections in the body color part there, which I reckon that looks pretty cool. Just in case you forget what car you're driving, there's an N badge placed proudly here. In fact, there are so many N badges around this car, I think we need to do a quick count. Coming around the side, we get to my favorite design change for the 21 model year, and that is these 19-inch wheels. The design itself is new. I love this dark chrome finish as well. But the important change is these wheels are now forged. So that saves 14.4 kilograms from the i30N's unsprung mass. That's a decent saving. The tyre is wrapped in sticky Pirelli P0s, and you see those brakes behind there. They've actually grown for this update as well. The old car had 345mm front discs, but this car has grown to 360mm, so that should deliver a decent improvement in terms of stopping performance and stopping power. We also get powered folding mirrors with a puddle lamp function, which I like, and you get smart key access as well. And just in case you've forgotten what car you're driving from the front to the side of the car, there is another N badge tucked here on the black side skirt. Around the back, the first thing you notice is this updated tail lamp design, which I think looks really, really cool. This sort of arrow treatment mirrors the DRLs that you get at the front. Roof mounted spoiler hasn't changed too much, but you do get this triangle light still. That was on the old car, but I really like it. I think it looks like a rain light on a Formula 1 car. Other design changes, the lower section of the rear bumper has changed pretty drastically. These fog lamps have moved down now, and remember the old car used to have the number plate on body color? Well, now this black plastic sweeps up much more aggressively. We also get a much more aggressive rear diffuser. I reckon that looks pretty cool. And these exhaust pipes, they're now bigger than before as well. And even better news is that this car does not have a petrol particulate filter, so it still sounds as unhinged as ever. Slip inside and it feels instantly racy in here. The seat is very heavily bolstered. It's set nice and low, and this sporty steering wheel has buttons that say drive mode, and one has a checkered flag on it, which is cool. And check this out. Old school handbrake for proper handbrakey fun. I like that. Points to Hyundai for keeping that manual function there. Premium versions also get a single piece bucket seat, which is lined with Alcantara, and they save about 2.2 kilograms. Premium versions also get a bit more equipment. This car has the optional sunroof, and you do get things like heated seats and a heated steering wheel. As for functionality of Apple CarPlay and Android Auto, the system is still wired for now, so no wireless functionality just yet. Which brings me to the single largest tech update for this 21 model year, and that is this bigger 10.25-inch central touchscreen. The good news is that if you have an Apple phone, the system does go full width of this 10.25-inch screen. Unfortunately, if you have an Android phone, I don't think Android Auto does go full width. It's restricted a little bit, which is a touch annoying. Now, one thing Hyundai has resisted, I think this car is all the better for it, is that it hasn't fitted digital dials. The clocks that we do have are analog, and they are a beautiful piece of design. They're easy to read, and they also have this pretty cool texture behind the dials there, which I really like. Equipment-wise, the level of standard gear is pretty high. You get things like a tire pressure monitoring system, rear parking sensors, the LED headlights and taillights that I mentioned before. You also score a dual zone climate control system, although one bummer is you don't actually get rear air vents. I'm about to become a new dad, and I would consider this car as my family car, but not having rear ventilation for the kids back there, that's a bit of a bummer. And if you opt for the premium model, you get extra goodies like front parking sensors, rain sensing wipers, you get privacy glass for the back passengers, and also the heated seats that I mentioned earlier and a heated steering wheel. Safety-wise, Hyundai did get a 5-star safety rating from ANCAP for this car in 2017, and that rating does still apply today. This updated car also adds some useful additions to some systems like lane keep follow assist and a rear cross traffic collision alert system. It also has something called a creep off mode, which unfortunately isn't something you can apply to your dirty Uncle Harry at the family barbecue, but it does mean that if you go into the system and turn it on and off here, it's called creep start. It's only available in automatic versions, and it means that with it off, when you take your foot off the brake at a set of lights, the car won't automatically start to creep forward. Personally, I like that function, but it's there to turn off if you wish. Now, I'll draw your attention to this button on the steering wheel, which has NGS written on it, and that stands for N Grin Shift. And to explain what that does, we've got to go for a drive. The changes to the chassis and the powertrain for this MY21 update are pretty extensive actually. Under the bonnet is the same 2-litre turbo petrol as before, but some changes to the turbo and the intercooler setup have liberated an extra 4 kilowatts and a useful 39 Newton meters, and that's taken total outputs to 206 kilowatts and 392 Newton meters. N's engineers have also mucked around with the ECU mapping to make the power delivery feel much more linear. And I tell you what, you can actually notice the extra pep and performance from the 2-litre. Hyundai also says that this change to the powertrain has shaved a few tenths from the 0 to 100 claim. So the manual car, that's gone down from 6.1 seconds to 5.9 seconds to hit 100 k's an hour. But this car is the 8-speed wet clutch automatic, and it's half a second quicker. So Hyundai reckons this car will go from 0 to 100 k's an hour in 5.4 seconds. That's quick for a hot hatch. That's almost a full second quicker than a Volkswagen Golf GTI. But is it actually that quick? So rather than just taking Hyundai's word for it, let's strap on the trusty V-Box and do a few launch control runs. So we've rigged up the V-Box now, and there is a launch control feature for this car. So you dive into the menu, there is a performance options tab, you click launch control. It allows you to dial how many revs you want, 3,500 RPM is the maximum. You push activate, that allows you to activate it for 5 minutes. And then what we're going to do is we're also going to use the inbuilt timer, just to see what that's like. Performance timer does whatever bracket you want, 0 to 100, 0 to 200. We'll do 0 to 100 today, see what's what. Yep, so there we go, 5.6 seconds to 100, far from ideal conditions for a high-power front-wheel drive car, but it does show you that the claim of 5.4 seconds isn't miles away. I'm fairly confident that in ideal conditions and with a better surface than we're on today, this is definitely a 5.4 second car. And so it proved. On a cleaner piece of tarmac, the i30N matched its 5.4 second claim repeatedly and then comprehensively beat it. By turning the traction control all the way off and finessing the launch control revs, we recorded a run of 5.3 seconds before getting a perfect getaway to clock 5 seconds dead to 100 k's an hour. So it is quick. As I mentioned before, this car is about a second quicker than a Volkswagen Golf GTI, and it's a chunk of change cheaper as well. Almost 10 grand if you throw a few options at the Golf. Let's talk about the gearbox itself, because that is the headline change of this car. The unit is an 8-speed dual clutch. It's developed in-house and built in-house by Hyundai itself, and it is a wet clutch unit, so that the benefit of that is that it can sustain high temperatures and higher torque outputs. So if you are going to track your car, and look, a lot of people that buy an i30N do take their car to a racetrack because it's also covered by a track warranty, which is a really handy feature for people buying this car. It means that given it's a wet clutch unit, it can handle a bit of punishment on the track in high temperatures, and you can rest assured your car isn't going to wilt away underneath you. In terms of how the gearbox performs, on the move, it's a dual clutch, so the shifts are snappy. That is the real benefit of having a dual clutch unit. Downshifts are, again, really, really quick. I get them when I want them. I'm not getting refused many shifts. And on the dash, there's even some shift lights which run across the top of the center LCD screen there, and I really like that. It's something that it's something that kind of speaks to the inner child in all of us and really does, I don't know, it tickles my fancy a little bit. It's a little bit childish, but I like that about this car. Now, I mentioned earlier this button on the steering wheel called NGS. There are a few modes for the gearbox itself. All of them have funny acronym names, so I'm going to talk you through them. NGS, when you press it, what happens is you get a countdown from 20 seconds on the LCD screen ahead of you, and it basically turns everything up to 11. So you get max boost pressure, max attack from the gearbox itself for 20 seconds. It's actually similar to Porsche's Sport Response System, which is in the center of their little Manatino dial on a 911, where you push that, you also get 20 seconds of maximum performance for scenarios like a cheeky overtake, or if you're coming up to a windy road, you haven't got time to get into N Sport mode or whatever, you can just hit that NGS mode and away you go. Now, the second acronym to be aware of is NPS, which stands for N Power Shift, and it's activated automatically as well when you go past 90% throttle. And what it does is when it does notice you're past 90% throttle, it changes the shift mapping to make the shifts faster and more assertive. So it's kind of the same deal like you would get if you'd put the car into sport mode, but it can happen in any of the car's modes, and it does it automatically, which is a handy little feature. The final acronym to be aware of with the gearbox is NTS, which sounds a little bit like an online delivery platform, but actually stands for N Track Sense Shift. And the car can somehow automatically know when you are on a circuit, and it changes the gearbox mapping to suit, which is pretty clever stuff. So those 3 modes for the gearbox, they work in conjunction with the 5 drive modes that every i30N gets. They are Eco, Normal, and Sport. You access those by this left toggle here on the steering wheel. And you also have 2 versions of the N Custom mode, which you access by pushing this little blue checkered flag button. I love those. They're fully configurable. You've got lots of little parameters you can play with. You can also put the ESC into sport mode, and the whole car, when you activate N mode, it kind of tightens up around you. And most of the chassis and steering package have been tweaked for this MY 2020 update. That includes the steering itself, which has been recalibrated, and the initial feel with the steering is just how meaty and nicely weighted it is. Most modern cars have really light steering these days, so it's kind of unusual to jump into a car and have that instant weight straight off the bat. When you start to move around and push on a little bit more at speed like we are now, that meatiness really does become your friend, gives you a greater sense of connection. The steering itself is very sharp, very accurate, and the rack itself is pretty quick, so you don't have to apply big amounts of lock coming into corners. You kind of steer this car with a roll of the wrists. The flip side to that is that when you are driving this car in a city car park or you're trying to do a U-turn in a residential street, the turning circle isn't quite what you might expect. So in those scenarios, be prepared to do a 3-point turn instead of completing the U-turn in one fell swoop. I truly think this car sounds absolutely phenomenal, especially in N mode. Those cracks, pops and bangs. Again, it's all about speaking to that inner child inside all of us. It really is. I know that N grin shift, I think that's a bit of a silly name, but it's kind of appropriate and spot on actually. The rest of the chassis, that's copped a fairly significant update as well. So all of the suspension, spring rates, damper rates, they've copped a bit of a tweak for this model year, and Aussie cars also gain a bespoke suspension tune. I am in N mode now and I have the adaptive dampers in their most aggressive setting. The car feels taut, it feels we're hitting mid-corner bumps, it's bouncing around a little bit. I like that, it's a very involving, sometimes physical driving experience, but the car feels alert, it feels alive, it's doing exactly what I want it to do. The downside is it can feel a little bit firm over big bumps, so maybe jumping into the onboard computer and tweaking the N mode to be exactly how you want it for the roads where you drive most often. You might want to have the suspension in its softer setting but everything else dialed up to 11. There is the option to do that as well. Other changes to the chassis includes adding some more negative camber to the front axle, and all of this works in conjunction with an eLSD. And when you get to a windy section of road, you do notice that electronic diff doing its thing, because the front axle on this car is very, very positive. There's lots of grip at the front end and it'll dive into corners really positively. And there is a little bit of torque steer on corner exit, but it's never unruly or unpleasant. It's just enough to let you know what's going on. There's also a lot of talent to the chassis, so if you dive into a corner, give a big lift off the throttle, the rear end will start to rotate around. It's never scary, it's never going to fire you off backwards into a hedge. It's just enough to let you know that this car has been set up by people that really care about the art of driving. The final thing worth mentioning about how this car drives are those brakes. They are instantly confidence inspiring. The pedal itself is quite firm, straight off the bat from the top of the travel, which is exactly what you want in a performance car. And you do notice the extra stopping performance from that brake upgrade, going from 345mm front brake discs to 360mm. So again, if you are going to track your car, and a lot of i30N owners are, you can rest assured that your brakes aren't going to wilt away underneath you, that you're not going to suffer from overheating issues, and you have that extra security of your track warranty. When you wrap all this together, this car is a really convincing and a really, really fun little performance car. And as much as I hate to admit it, things like N grin shift, it's kind of legit, because this car really does make you smile. So is the 8-speed dual clutch better than the 6-speed manual? Well, it certainly made the car quicker by a useful amount as well. And the unit itself is very impressive. Personally, I'd still go for the 6-speed manual because I prefer my hot hatch with a manual gear shift, but I can completely understand why the majority of buyers will likely go for this automatic version. And when you consider the addition of that auto amongst all of the other changes to the design, the technology, and the way this car drives, one of the best hot hatches you can currently buy just got a whole lot better.